Hi, everyone. My name is Peter Leach, and I'm the chair of the Motion Picture Production Industry Association of BC. I'd like to welcome all participants today, including our international guests and panelists. Many thanks to Creative BC's Catherine Pavoni and Jennifer McNeil, the LMGI, and MPIA's Amber Orchard for organizing today's event. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge that here on BC's Lower Mainland, we are fortunate to live and work on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples of Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam First Nations. We are here today to talk about the art of parking. No matter what city you're from, parking is becoming a major challenge. This is especially true in location production. Every filming jurisdiction across the world experiences unique challenges, but parking is something that location managers and crew can relate to no matter where they are. As cities continue to grow and develop, the areas that are crucial to supporting our vehicles are disappearing. At the same time, as production budgets increase, so does the size of the circus, the amount of equipment, the number of vehicles, and the amount of power needed to support all of the above. We all want to continue to grow sustainably as production jurisdictions, and we know what that means, that as an industry, we need to collaborate on creative solutions to reduce the footprint of location filming. We are here today to listen and learn from location managers from the world's major centers for production. They are the first to arrive and the last to leave on any location production and know intimately the challenges relating to location filming and, of course, parking. All the insight they can share will inform our way forward to solutions. With that, I'll turn it over to Hans Dale, our moderator for today's panel, to get all the conversation started. Hans is an avid collaborator, father, production manager, and location manager. He is an active member and enthusiast of the LMGI and sits on the DGC BC Executive Board. He has spent over 20 years working on the feature films and television series, including his latest production, Turner and Hooch, which is currently airing on Disney+. He spent many years on set as an ALM in the deep trenches, all the while trying to perfect the art of parking, and understands the challenges facing the motion picture community globally, with space at a premium and the demands ever increasing. Over to you, Hans.
Thanks, Peter. That's very that's very funny. So yeah, I have spent a lot of time in the trenches, and I feel like I'm almost starting to detach from the trenches a little bit, which is funny that I was invited to moderate this panel. But I feel that having this conversation start with our Location Manager Guild International colleagues is the biggest thing. So I'd really like to thank Mike and Stevie and John and Ben when he does get close to internet and can join us. I think Ben's a little bit behind on our panel here today from the UK, but I just want to say thank you very much for your time, because though this conversation is kind of rooted in Vancouver, it reaches to Los Angeles and New York and to London and all these places all around the world. And as we've discovered in the last day, even just having small conversations about it, the problems are universal, global, planetary, if I could be so bold as to even use that word, and say that we're all in the same boat. And now how to solve those problems or solve those challenges or tackle them, I think takes all these people to do that. So the LMGI is a great group of people. I would encourage people to join if you can and find a way into these conversations with these folks. It's not just for location managers, it's for any people that are interested in filming anywhere in the world. So with that, I will quickly run through the intros. I'll let our panelists intro themselves. So I'll just head straight to John Rakich, who is our Rakich. I've never really nailed that down. Who's the president of the Location Manager Guild International and based in Toronto, Ontario. And I think you're on mute, buddy. Oh, there you go.
Thanks, Hans. I'm John Rakich. I am the Location Managers Guild International President. I am also the Directors Guild of Canada, Ontario Locations Caucus representative. So I get to wear two hats. I've been in the industry for, over 20 years. I don't like doing the math. Currently working as the supervising location manager on this third season of C. And I'm glad we're having this discussion. It's something that we all talk about in our private offline, and it's something we should start discussing now. So glad to be here.
Great. And from New York, Mike Buonanno.
Hi, Thanks, Hans, and thanks everybody for joining in. My name's Mike Buonanno. I've been doing locations for a little over 10 years. I started in New England and I joined the local 481 IATSE there in locations, and I moved down to New York in 2012. I'm now a DGA location manager, also an LMGI member. And I'm excited to get this conversation started on a global level about how parking affects all of our areas and what we can do to help minimize our footprint and be better guests in these neighborhoods that we're filming in.
Great. How about the illustrious and heart of our organization, I always say, Stevie Nelson from Los Angeles. Oh, I think you're muted, Stevie.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure can.
Okay. I'm Stevie Nelson. I'm a key assistant location manager in Scout, the founding member of the LMGI. I have been doing this over 20 years. I work in film and television, currently on a new TV series for HBO Max. And I'm very excited to start a conversation with our colleagues about what we can do about what really is an industry-wide problem. I've talked to our colleagues in Sydney, all over the world. And one of the things I say is, what is your biggest challenge that you're having in your area? And invariably it's coming back: parking, parking, and parking.
And I think I see Ben coming in. Ben, can you hear us? It's almost like wartime where we're trying to get Ben in the trenches. You there? Oh, I see some activity. Hopefully you're coming online, Ben. Okay, well, I'll come back to Ben in a second, and he can join in the conversation. We'll pause for him to introduce himself. Oh, there he is. Ben, you're on mute. Can I introduce you? There's Ben. Yeah, there he is. Ben. There you go.
I'm also on hold with my Wi-Fi provider because I'm trying to hotspot and on hold at the same time, and I don't know if that's going to work. So if I dive off, I'll be two minutes to sort that out.
Yeah, no problem. We were just doing intro, so if you want to just give us a background.
Yeah, of course. So I've been a supervising location manager for the last 20 years, primarily working in London, cities across the UK and Europe. And yeah, really interested to hear the discussion and take part as much as I can, and perhaps give some context of how things are happening and how things are changing over in London, specifically the bigger cities I work in. So London, Leeds, Manchester, Glasgow, as well as kind of time in Paris, Berlin. So yeah, really interested to participate.
Well, thank you. And we're really looking for your wisdom here, I think, because we're at that point in Vancouver, I think, where things are starting to get tough. I wanted to share, if I could, really quickly, just a quick map that was done by one of our illustrious young ALMs in town, who did this years ago. And let me see if I can get this. So one of the things that started this conversation for us is just the lack of surface parking in Vancouver. This is the core of Vancouver, if you can all see that. That's our 9 lots that we're all battling for on a regular basis here in Vancouver. And it is a battle, and it means a lot of conversations between a lot of people, and unfortunately sucks up a lot of our resources trying to figure out how we're going to time and coordinate all this stuff. So this is Haley Reed is an ALM on the show Batwoman, I think. And right now, this is where we're at with our parking. Not a lot of surface lots left for what sometimes is looking like 10 or 15 units filming in the downtown city in a day. So that's a real challenge for us. And that's what's prompted part of this conversation. I'm going to stop sharing now. So the other thing that's happening too, as we all know, is the climate emergency is really starting to hit municipalities. Here in Vancouver, we have had a lot of conversations last few years over the installation of bike lanes and increasing public transit, which means lots of buses are taking up places where trucks for filming would normally go. And so we've had to come up with other things. And the climate action plan for the city of Vancouver, which really kind of frightens me as a person that works in film, but at the same time reassures me that we're taking care of this challenge, has been outlined for us. And some of the things that they've come up with is, more bike lanes, more curb ramps, more pedestrian crosswalks, reducing traffic in residential and school areas. 22 kilometers of new bus lanes in Vancouver are coming soon. Then the biggest takeaway from that climate action emergency action plan is that 50% of our vehicles by the year 2030 will be required to be zero emissions. So we've got a transportation problem, we've got a space problem. And so that's what kind of led to this conversation. And I hope that I can start to ask you guys questions. I'm just going to throw them at you guys and see if we can just have a conversation trying to talk about not just the problems, because a lot of times we talk about the problems, but also what you guys have done in your jurisdictions to get yourselves out of these pickles that you're in, which occupies so much of your time. So maybe, Mike, I'll start with you. If you could tell us anything about New York City and what some of your most memorable parking problems or stories are, and how you got yourself out of those pickles. How did you get yourself out of that jam? Because ultimately, I hate to say, the parking jam always sort of falls to us. We're trying to find a way to shoot the show, and then we have to support finding the equipment and the parking to support what we're going to shoot. And it's almost like sometimes I feel like finding the building's not a problem. It's finding out how we're going to access that building and do those types of things. So Mike, maybe I'll start with you. And guys, if you don't mind, you're welcome to take yourselves off of mute, and we'll just leave this open so that you can answer at your leisure.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
So, I think now post-COVID or during COVID still, parking in the city in New York has been extra tough. There's more obstacles, more hoops to jump through, with outdoor dining, bike lanes, open streets. It's harder to park the trucks close to set. It's harder to get base camp close to set. The last job I was on, we were filming in the theater district because it was closed down. We were filming on 41st Street, but we had to have our base camp all the way on 51st Street, which is 10 blocks away. And we shot there for about 7 days. And every day the director would ask, like, why is base camp so far away? And I don't really have a great answer. It's really because of these new parking rules that the city has in place. We can't park within 21 feet of a restaurant unless we want to pay to close it down. And if you're a big production, that might be easy for you to do, but there's 65 productions in the city, and I don't think the majority of them want to spend their money closing down a restaurant for a day. And that's the challenge that we're facing every day, especially filming in New York, in the 5 boroughs. Every street has a restaurant on it, at least one.
Right.
And
so on a regular basis, it's either paying this premium to shut down restaurants or paying for a parking. So what that cost is just like taken out of the kitty of things that we can spend on the show, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, you're losing time.
Yeah.
Bringing actors to and from the campers, you're spending money closing restaurants down, and it's just becoming more challenging, and another kicker that we're not allowed to do in New York right now is park on both sides of the street. So we can only park on one side of the street in New York. And if you're a period show, you're only able to look in one direction, really, because you can't dress the full block like you used to. I'm hoping that will go away, but the Mayor's Office of Film right now doesn't know when that might be.
Right. Wow. Well, Stevie, how about in California? I mean, you have a lot of experience in New Mexico and California. Obviously, Los Angeles is the one that we're always looking to for leadership on this, or kind of good ideas on how to get ourselves out of pickles. But have you seen things change? Have things, as things have gotten denser and the surface lots are getting developed, which I assume is happening in Los Angeles from what I've seen over the years, is this changing? And what are shows doing to accommodate that?
Oh, it's crazy. Almost all of the big flat surface lots in areas like downtown LA are no longer available. They're all high-rise buildings or soon to be high-rise buildings. We're shuttling great distances. COVID has certainly created additional issues. We don't have a uniform policy maybe I'm not supposed to say that, but it really differs in Los Angeles studio to studio. Every studio has their own interpretation of our COVID rules for work. I just came off of a show who insisted on no shuttling at all except for first team.
Right.
And so everything, all the locations had to be within walking distance of base camp and crew parking. And we threw out all these locations that, you know, creatively were exactly what they wanted. And it's like, sorry, there's no way, you know, you're going to be hiking miles.
Yeah. Now that's a real big problem, right? Because now we're getting told by the world and by the studio essentially that creatively we have to make compromises, and that's a really tough pill for. I mean, that's what we're there to satisfy is the creative vision of our bosses. So it's a real tough pill to swallow for us when we're directed out of that because of these conditions. Do you think that with COVID going away, is that something that's going to still, that influence is still going to be there? I mean, I keep thinking that COVID's going away, but then I hear these stories about LA County and things like that, where the masks are back and things like that with the Delta. It's not happening anytime soon.
I think it still very much depends on a studio, because at the same time I was shooting my show where they were saying no shuttling, I had a colleague, Scott Poole, doing the Amazon series Goliath, and they had, you know, 150 background, and they were shuttling from a massive base camp miles away. They were just putting them all in buses and moving them back and forth. So it really, that's part of the, I don't know if it's frustration, but it makes it really hard to project budgetarily what you're looking at until you talk to your, at least here in the States, California, until you talk to your individual studio. What is not going away is the same issues Vancouver's having, which is more bus lanes, more damn bike lanes painted green that you then have to, if you're doing a period show, you then have to try and paint over and then paint back.
Right.
Those things are not going away.
Is there conversations? Are you able to have conversations with the municipalities and with the engineering departments in these cities? And this might hold true for Mike as well in New York, or Ben in London. Is the industry there able to have a conversation? Certainly in Los Angeles, they have a lot more throw than we do here, but are they able to approach the cities and say, hey, can we just tone that down a bit? And, you know, maybe us or include us in the talk about what we're losing when we paint these things, you know, green and yellow and all that stuff?
They do. Film LA, the Film LA board, which has, you know, our Teamsters local business rep Duffy is on it, among other people, have tried to get input. But in Los Angeles, there's so many disparate departments that don't think to consult anybody.
Yeah.
And, you know, you've got the whole people, and it's not a bad thing, but you've got like the whole bike people into bikes and public transportation, and they just unilaterally make these decisions without ever even thinking about the consequence. And then we're stuck having to kind of push back or ask them, you know, have you thought about this? You know, it's going to be extremely challenging. You're taking big swaths now out of filming.
Yeah.
Because of what you've done.
It's almost like we need to connect the dots for those people that are in those departments and say, look, this revenue that you're getting from, and the revenue that comes in from filming, especially in places like Los Angeles, certainly in Vancouver, I think people have acknowledged that, you know, that's happening. It's connected to this one thing, which is support space or parking, whatever it is. So we need to connect those dots for them really, really vocally, right?
Yeah, and then of course we have as things continue to get more and more congested, and especially in downtown and areas where there's now, you know, high-rise condominiums and stuff, parking is at a premium, and we have special conditions for, you know, probably 60 neighborhoods, different neighborhoods. Some of them limit your posting, your actual street parking for your working trucks to, you know, 300 feet or whatever, you know, it is, because it's a balancing act. We have so much filming here in Los Angeles, and we've had it for decades. It's understandable that, you know, a lot of the city is burned out on it, or, you know, it's not considered exciting, and they don't think about the financial benefits. It's just, oh, this is a freaking pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Where am I going to park my car?
I think
the councils listen to their constituents.
Yeah.
those are the ones speed dialing their council offices.
Yeah, we certainly hear that here in Vancouver these days. How is Toronto, John? Is Toronto in the same boat in that way? Like we've pretty much had a parallel growth, I think, Vancouver and
Yeah,
Toronto.
and we also have the curse that we're in a massive housing boom and construction boom, where every surface lot, if it's not a condominium, it will be. And we've noticed a major systemic shrinking of surface lots. And for us, it's not just bike lanes or painted bike lanes; it's permanent bike lanes with concrete installations as a safety barrier. We're lucky that our local film office in the city tries to work with us to keep it to a minimum, that we don't lose certain valuables on street parking, because they know at some point you still need to get stuff close by. But what's been happening nowadays, especially with the size of units, is things are either going further away, or to be honest, a lot of time you leave stuff at the stage.
Right.
On the last show I was on, we had a location where the shuttle from base camp to set was 25 minutes, because it was just easier for us to do everything in the studio and just bring the cast up.
Mike, have you had to do that? Leave your base camp at the studio and then shoot somewhere else and just to eat it, so that you're not paying, like in Vancouver, I on the production side, I would always have a heart attack because we were spending almost like $100,000 an episode in parking. So you're looking for ways to base out of the studio where your parking's paid or covered. Is that happening in New York? Is that even feasible in places like that? It's not going to be feasible in Vancouver because our stage complexes are so much further out of the core than not.
I haven't worked on a production that's been able to leave base camp at the stage. Most of the studios and stages are in Brooklyn, and if you're filming in Manhattan, it's just such a time suck for you to travel like that.
Yeah.
So you're finding parking as close as you can, but it may be a 5 to 10 minute shuttle with New York traffic. I mean, a lot of I guess I would say the cop dramas that are trying to stay close to the stage, they'll leave their base camp there and just shuttle like somewhere in the neighborhood because they're not trying to go far out. But that's not what everybody's doing.
Yeah.
Well, pre-COVID, we also tried to cheat by, you'd leave what you can further away. We'd use local hotels to process cast and back, have something that's nearby that's with a 5-minute distance. But then when COVID came in and all the hotels shut down, it became problematic. We're running out of room. That's just always going to be the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just hard to please everybody. On my last job, I had suggested us using hotel rooms in the city, and I think a lot of the production was on board with that, but there was some department heads that didn't want to deal with the hassle of going up on an elevator and getting the actor into hair and makeup room and then going down the elevator and dealing with that when they could have been across the street from set rather than 10 blocks from set. So it's really hard to get everybody on the same page.
Can you tell us what studio that is? No spoilers.
Well, the studio was fine with it. I think it was some interdepartmental thing.
The time aspect about it, we just had to start budgeting within the day for massive shuttle transports for cast, or the cast wouldn't get to go back as often.
Yeah, and the battle is of course the minute you say, well, we got to travel further, we got to spend time moving or whatever it is, you're eating up shooting time or you're eating up your cast's time. Here we are in the whole of the industry trying to reduce the number of hours we're working, and we kind of made some headway, I think, over COVID with that. But I think it's going to get reversed if this is the trend, because there's really kind of, we'd all like to think that we're going to have quick answers about how it's going to work, but it's all those little micro details. Like I think, Mike, you had mentioned yesterday, you said this great thing about in your dream, you could just shrink the trucks, right? Or,
well, yeah, I mean, one of my favorite jobs was working on Wes Anderson's Moonrise Kingdom in Rhode Island, and Wes Anderson doesn't want to see 18-wheelers or campers. So we had 4 cargo vans, one for grip, electric, camera, and props. And then base camp was just camping tents that locations did have to set up everywhere, which was a pain, but it was just part of like his set. That's what he likes to do. And, we had big actors, Bruce Willis, Edward Norton, Frances McDormand, Tilda Swinton, staying in tents, and they were happy about it. And nobody was complaining. And I just think that, if Wes Anderson can do it, why can't other productions do it? And it doesn't have to be cargo vans. But I just feel like, you know, the 53 to 65 foot trailers are really that's one of the biggest things that I think can hurt us when we're out in the world. You know, the mayor's office in New York says the biggest struggle that they have is dealing with complaints. And that's why they can't help productions as fast as they can, because they're dealing with like residents and businesses complaining. And, you know, now with open streets and outdoor dining taking parking away, and I have nothing against that, I fully support it, but these residents have lost parking because of outdoor dining, and now production is going to come in and take even more parking from them. So yeah, my dream would be to have 24-foot box trucks or smaller. They come, they drop right on set, so grip and electric and camera are all happy. They got their truck closed, they didn't have to push far. Then the trucks go somewhere else while we're filming, and when we wrap, they come back and we load up and go. And if we're in a neighborhood with hotels and we have a big base camp, like maybe we have to talk about using hotels on that day, because it's going to help us in the long run. If we start doing stuff like this, it's just, there's too much competition now with all these streaming services, you know, like we're all very busy. It's a good thing and it's a bad thing. So.
Right. So to that point, now I know that coordinating, we were going to talk a little bit about studio coordination and how that's going with parking at stages. I had mentioned that earlier, but just in the streets, like for example, here in Vancouver, when we are told that we put in little holds here and there to the locations that are frequently filmed. And maybe one of the things that we should talk about is pulling away from these frequently filmed locations and starting to really dig deep. It's very hard for us to dig deep to scout in Vancouver. I genuinely feel like we've unearthed as many gems as we're going to unearth here because it's such a small town. And so it's hard to not revisit the same places over and over again, especially with the volume of work. Maybe it's easier in a bigger locale like Toronto or New York or Los Angeles. You guys tell me. John, you're nodding no.
It's the same scenario. We're also bound, much like other jurisdictions, with travel zones. So, you know, I could tell you, I could find you a Midwest American city in London, Ontario, which is an hour and a half away, but that's an hour and a half away, and the producer will just crucify me because it's not within the downtown core. Right. There's this nudge about, you know, we can get all the parking you want out there. Nobody's out there, but they all want to stay within the labor zone, which, in the problem of Toronto, is that zone's not getting larger, but it's just getting more populated.
Yeah.
You know, so we're running out of less and less, and you do, especially on episodic, tend to go back to those places you know you can get into quickly, because you don't have the time to go find something brand new and break ground and negotiate. You go to the things in your back pocket when you want to shoot on a Tuesday, and Friday the designer's like, I need a restaurant. Well, here's one I know we can get.
Yeah.
It just happens to be 3 other shows will be down there, and I'm going to have to call in favors or discuss amongst ourselves about who gets to park as close as possible.
Right. And that's kind of what I was getting at, was discussing amongst ourselves. Like I've found that you spend a lot of time checking with other location managers, checking with other shows to see what their board looks like, to see if you can kind of just make it all work. Does that happen in a big city like Los Angeles that has a huge footprint? I mean, certainly, obviously it's happening in Toronto. What about LA, Stevie? Is it happening there?
I'm sorry, you dropped out. I missed your key question.
The question between when you're filming in these recurring locations and the coordination that it takes to get that happening, is that frequent? Is that like, to me, you know, I've always said, like, I look at our job as kind of like widgets of time. You've got 20 minutes to devote to every task, so to speak. And when you start to spend like 4 or 5 widgets just talking about where you're going to park base camp, you're taking away from the 20 widgets that, you know, creatively you want to satisfy, financially, you know, you got to make sure that you're on budget or dealing with the costs of things. It's just taking widgets of time when you're now coordinating for 7 other shows to figure out how you're all going to make it work so that you can all maximize, you know, your show.
Well, you know, John may be a much more magnanimous person than myself. I don't know about Mike, but you know, in Los Angeles, quite frankly, even my dearest friends who's on another show, if we both know we're sort of looking at the same thing, I'm going to try and snag that parking first. I'd rather them come to me and ask, can they accommodate or help? You know, you tend to be very quiet about what you're doing because you know. You've got to get in there first. For us, with our permitting system, it's whoever log gets in, log numbers and permit is on there first, gets precedence. Now, I have had, which is highly annoying, sometimes it becomes a studio level thing.
Right.
Where I've had parking, I've had it locked in, I own it. And I had another production, it was a George Clooney show. He did a number of years ago, a science fiction show, and they were shooting on the block over. And they wanted our posting because my trucks were in his shot.
Right.
And the studio heads talked to each other. Because, I had it. It was like, oh, sorry, man. I've got my show I'm worried about. Sorry for you.
Yeah.
And it got enough up that the studio heads, talked to each other, and we flexed and we moved.
Wow.
On that level, which was, at that point, it's their decision. It's not my problem at that point. As long as I have it, what they choose to do with it is,
it's well out of our hands. So let me ask you this: how much in advance do you have to not lock down this parking in an instance where you're going to go there? If it's a TV show versus a film, I always found you don't have lead time on a TV show, right? That's what our biggest challenge is. We get the scripts late, things they're developing as you're kind of bullshitting your way through, getting to the point of knowing what you're going to do, and then a feature's there and they've locked up that parking for 2 months because they know they're going to be coming, and they might be coming twice, and they might be coming a third time.
Yeah.
And that's a big challenge. That happens, I assume, everywhere, right?
It does, but Los Angeles for the last few years is very TV heavy.
Right.
We get a few big features, but more features I think go to Toronto. They're going to Atlanta. They're going to Vancouver. Then our bread and butter, the huge engine for the last years has been television.
Yeah.
So for most of us are turning stuff over pretty quickly.
Yeah.
It's just you have to throw in a permit way before your tech scout. You have to guess. Before the DP ever sees it or the director even sees it, you have to guess sort of for us what you think you're going to need. You can always adjust it and fine tune it after your tech scout, but you got to get something in there. And sometimes you guess wrong. They come out and they say, "Oh, I want this instead." It's like all you can do is your best guess on this is what I think we need, and I hope that covers you.
Now, so in New York, Mike, like the blocks are different sizes too, right? In all these places, I'm hoping that Ben can join us because, my observations in the UK is that the block sizes are a lot smaller. So to your point about having the 24-foot trucks versus the 65-foot trucks, you just need to have smaller units, right? I would think that that's not unusual in New York, but how do you have rules around the size of the trucks? I think for a while here in Vancouver, we talked about limiting them, and I know that that's gone back and forth, but I don't know.
I think it was before my time in New York, but Will Smith had one of those 65-foot campers that
I
doubled up.
I parked that trailer on this movie right here.
We've had it. I've had it.
All right.
Yeah.
So that was
We all have.
that was the show. That was the camper that broke the camel's back, and you need a DOT permit for anything over 53 feet, which we get, and that's it. Like you just have to have on your permit that you have the DOT permit. So the honey wagon, wardrobe, hair, makeup, and then any equipment trucks that are over that, we're fine to put on the streets. And when you're in the city, like in Midtown, it's mostly commercial parking, so that's fine. But there's a lot of residences like that were residential neighborhoods that we're filming in, where these massive trucks are taking residential parking or metered parking in front of a lot of businesses. The businesses complain that they're not making money because no one can see their storefronts, and the neighbors are complaining that the generators are running all day. And I just think, like, if we shrink it down a little, we're still going to get complaints. I don't think that's going to stop, but it's just I don't know, it's good PR. I think we're trying to minimize that, and in addition to the 53-foot trailers, we're taking another 20 feet, 30 feet of room behind each trailer for the gear just to sit in the sidewalk.
The other thing, perception, that I'm sure you run into is you have people wanting compensation And you might personally, your budget may be tapped and you say you don't have the money, and they're looking around at all this shit that you have and $100,000 of vehicles, and they look at you like you're crazy because they know that's not true. I mean, my department budget may not have money, but we clearly have money when we have,
It's funny you say that, because in Boston, where I've worked, you have to pay to displace the residents. You get yellow signs that say resident parking, and you direct them into garages or lots because they pay for their parking in Boston. In New York, they don't pay for their parking. So the mayor's office says, look, it's whoever, if you find parking spot in your neighborhood, that's great. But if we're permitting it, we give 7 days notice. We put our permits up, we put our resident letters up, we put our phone number. My personal cell phone number is on the permits, so the residents can call me. They'll call me the day before and say, I didn't know that I couldn't park on my street. And I'll say, well, look, we're doing everything we can. We're putting the permits up in bright pink paper with my phone number on it. And I would love to pay for you to park, and I'm sorry that we're displacing you, but I don't want to set that precedent that we paid for this resident to park in a garage, and now every production is expected to do it. And it's one thing what Boston does because you're displacing people that are paying for their parking. But if you're not paying for parking,
Is Ben, are you online? I wanted to throw to you for a couple of minutes if I can. You're here.
Yeah, great.
That's great. So we're obviously talking about just street parking and all that. And my question was about trucks. Now, one of the things that made me scratch my head when I was in the UK was the size of the blocks. So these big 65-foot trucks that we towed around here in North America, we can find space to figure them out close to where we're filming normally. But is that viable in the UK? Is that viable in some of the bigger, older cities where the block sizes are much smaller and you can't really fit more than one truck on a half block or full block even, And you're on mute, my friend. Oh, there you go.
Now moreover, what people are trying to do is as we all know, everything's big, multiple 18-ton trucks. And just to give you a little picture about London, so we're looking at reducing from about 20 bases in 2019 to approximately 6 or 7 usable bases.
Wow.
And of those 6 and 7, none of them include crew car parking. So you have your crew cars, and you'll have all of your dailies and anybody else turning up in a separate place. To give you an idea, my average bill is 300-400 cars a day at £50. So what's that? $75-80 a car per day, plus 2 security, plus a marshal on each car park. And I'll have anything up to 3 to 4 car parks to contend with on busy crowd days. And then I might have a unit base. What's happening now is you'll have a unit base. They're also heavily restricted with curfews, so you can get in, but then you can't get out, so you're holding your bases over. So yeah, London's a challenge, but to get back to your point on parking, I mean, yeah, it's great on Piccadilly where you can almost park a unit along one side of the road if you're really lucky. But moreover, you're parking probably in about between 10 and 15 different tech parking runs. So I will have anything up to 30 to 40 security out just on tech parking. And then you say, yeah, so I'll have a tiny section for lighting, and then tucked around the block, I'll have another section for grips. And I'll have another section for art department, all of which have had time to pre-dress. I'm buying locations for longer and longer now, 5, 7, 10 days in some instances, just for a 1-2 day shoot. All of them have to have their trucks as close as possible. And yeah, it comes with its challenges. Things are further away. The bills for pickups. A friend of mine's working on a shoot that's just did a big day yesterday. He had 45 pickup and trailer drivers in London, so you can imagine the carnage that caused.
Right.
And you just literally saw trailer drivers driving around in the centre of London in kind of circles. What are we doing to fix it? We're trying to convince people that they will have to cross-load. We're trying to convince people that if we can find a sensible tech base and to start thinking about what equipment they need to bring and to do it in Lutons, which I suppose is exactly the same thing as Michael's suggesting, because, you know, in that bay of an 18 tonner, I can probably fit 3 Lutons or you know, 2 Lutons and a dog box. But it's a challenge, and certainly in a city London, so Westminster, Camden, you know, you're basing 15-20 minutes away at least. We don't have as much resistance with people using hotels for crowd changing, because they're kind of geared up to that here. And we, you know, we can do that quite easily, especially for crowd, and then cast perhaps somewhere nicer. So yeah, we're doing that. They tried a couple of films where they skipped having a unit base at all, and it works all right on independent features, but then you try and get kind of costume, makeup and certain departments off their trucks, and it's just not going to happen. I think some of them must come with riders to say that they have to have a 5-station makeup vehicle for one artist.
Yeah. Is there any talk in the UK about restricting some of the stuff because of the size and the impacts last year? Certainly, and maybe even in the recent times. I mean, last year has been kind of insane in terms of sizes.
I mean, I think everybody knows, but we now have ULEZ as well. So we have an ultra low emission zone within London. So I think to take anything that's not a Euro cargo, which is the lower emission vehicles in, you pay a surcharge. It costs me to drive my diesel truck. It costs me an additional 20 quid a day to drive it into London. So $30 to get my car in, to go and have a look at the parking that I probably won't be able to get. There are huge restrictions. Most of the bigger companies have responded to that by using this Euro cargo trailer. So they're pulling things in. But yeah, Westminster are saying they don't want 18 tonners in, or there's only certain roads you can pull them into. Camden, which is another big borough, it will fall in suit. Over here, just to give you some context, so we have we have a fair few London boroughs, in excess of 20 London boroughs, all of which have got their own film office. About 15 of those are looked after by one independent arm's length management company. Right. So you talk to them, they then go to the parking officials then come back to them, and each borough has different nuances. One of the most popular unit bases, which you guys will all know really well, is something called Lincoln's Inn. So Lincoln's Inn, you compete with 2 different councils. So you could turn up to have a look at yours, and Camden would have let it to one, and the city would have to another. So yeah, it's just a huge competitive mess. Just to touch base, I'm now working on something, and people say we want all the cars cleared. So I think my biggest parking bill to date was probably about £110,000 in one day.
Wow.
And the director wanted to see up both sides of Kensington, the gate where the National History Museum is, to put it into context, wanted to look both ways. So I had tech parking. I budgeted a show for a fairly sizable Apple show the other day. And he said, what should I be benchmarking, Ben, per day? I was like, 50 grand.
Yeah.
He was like, and for my locations. And I was like, no, plus your locations.
Yeah, that's just the parking cost.
Yeah. Yes, I'm between £3,000 and £10,000 a day for unit bases. So I mean, it's scary. There are people that are charging £6,500 a day, and then you've got another 2,000-3,000 a day for crew parking, and then your car parking charges range anything from £60 a bay, so that's a 6-foot, 7-foot bay, and I'm knocking out maybe 50 to 100 of those a day. It's cheaper, not that they'd like me to say it, but it's cheaper for me to let them ticket the vehicles,
right,
and apply for the permit to park.
Well, we will edit that out of the live broadcast. There's a big beep right where you say, well, it's cheaper. The minute you're cheaper, they're like, what are you doing? And you're like,
certain location managers, including myself, headline our our invoice remittance with it now, saying it would have been cheaper for me to take the tickets because they can't tow an 18-tonner. So, you park it there, it's staying. But there are boroughs, and just one last thing on that is there are big initiatives now, which I'm quite pleased about, where we're bringing in bio generators for in certain boroughs, and some London boroughs are working really hard because obviously we struggle to power sets all the time. Generators flick on at 5 o'clock in the morning, and yeah, it's a big initiative and a big push at the minute to move to kind of a more sustainable green way of powering those sets.
Yeah, that's actually how I opened our talk. So I was going to ask about that. Is that I know here in Vancouver, we've got a campaign that I've really been supportive of and trying to help get the message out about tie-ins and using, looking and seeking ways to tie into power in, at locations or where base camps are parked. The city of Vancouver has been amazing. Our events office and film office here in Vancouver has been amazing. And Jeff Tioli, who's the head of that office, and Jody have spearheaded this campaign to drop power, these big transformers that we can plug our units into in some of the more frequently filmed locations. So we're not running any generators for our base camps at some of these locations. They're hoping to really get that going. If these types of things are happening, that means a retrofit for equipment. Are you guys seeing the same things in your towns? Obviously, Ben, you're seeing biogenerators. Is there anything like that, Mike and Stevie, in the US?
I know there's an HBO show up in upstate New York that's using solar power generators. I haven't seen a lot of it, but I've seen some photos of that.
And to that point, actually, that kind of segues into what happens at studios. And I know that there's a lot of people on this call that work with the studios. So they've got a lot of questions about the coordination. There's a couple of questions in the chat boxes regarding lockups. I think Ken, who's on the board of the LMGI, is asking or just talking about people not having space at the stages to store equipment. So they pack them into the trucks and they carry the trucks into town with them. Do you guys see that sort of happening? And or how does all the coordination work for big studio lots in your places? And I could start with Ben. You were at Pinewood yesterday, and I was curious to know how Pinewood manages their parking situation there.
Badly.
Nobody from Pinewood on this call, thank God.
Yeah, no. Well, I had a chat with them. I had a chat with them today. So most of the studios are expanding at a huge rate. So right opposite my office, they're building another stage. That's knocked out all of the available parking for the stage that we're shooting on. It's a real bum fight. I mean, it's there's not a spare foot free. So we had an Arctic turn up today. We had to park 2 of our cars in there, then shunt our cars out the way, get the Arctic in. By the time we had reversed our cars back into park, the space had gone. You find that people just get in and don't move. There's a fairly sizable show that just doesn't move any of its kit, and all the deliveries come to it. Studios aren't, kind of you're just there, and you get the walls around the studio, but it's a real challenge that they're going to have to meet head on, because they're building, a huge amount of stages, but not most of them are the same. You shoot in Shepperton, you're almost basing. There are instances where you will have to base outside the studio to facilitate your shoot.
Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it? That you've got to leave your site and
So
then you're budgeting all this stuff elsewhere. Yeah. So
you'll drive out of the gates. Another thing that people kind of think with parking tied in is kind of crew parking. My team have to arrive between an hour and a half before they start work, because there's nowhere for them to park in the morning. So it takes them about an hour to get onto the lot at Pinewood, probably about 45-50 minutes in Shepperton. And if you're not out by the time the traffic starts going, what you'll find is most people leave, jump in their cars, park their cars around the corner, which pisses off all the residents. And then you've got, and then you can just walk from the studio. So the studios in the UK are facing huge problems with parking both trucks, and also they're all facing curfews as well, because they know now this circus of, anything up to 30, 40, 18 tons and pieces of kit are going to fly in. you know, anything between kind of 2 o'clock in the morning and then back out again at 5. It's just.
Yeah. Mike, how about New York? What's
workable?
It's not workable. And you know, we'd love to be able to just offer the answers, but the answers sometimes, I was joking about this yesterday with you guys when I said, you know, I want to draw a chart and say this, on this side of the chart is all the things that location managers and people in our department can control. And on this other side is things we can't control. And I think that side would be very heavily populated because we are trying to, you know, I kid when I say this, but I mean it semi-seriously. We're trying to satisfy a creative vision for the people that's what enticed us into this job. And we're spending time dealing with stuff that's got nothing to do with that, right? So it's a real pickle. And the only way out of it is to ask for more help, for more support. You know, sometimes you'll see shows where there's an assistant that's fully committed to parking. Pretty much that's all they do. And I'm sure that you guys all have teams where you just have that strong person that knows parking better than anybody. And that's who you go to, and you just pull them in, and you're trying to rope the best parkers onto your department. Are you available? Can you come and work on our show? Because you're just a master parker. Mike, what's the studio situation? You were saying something earlier that's stuck, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but I wanted to talk more about stage management. And you had said something the other day about the grid and just this conversation between location managers and shows, how that works. That's kind of been like, I liked the concept that you had mentioned. It was a grid. It was kind of managed on its own or managed outside of the people. So there's no favoritism being played, or there's no games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the mayor's office of film in New York, you know, we have, it's like Stevie had said earlier, you know, we want to get our grid request in as soon as possible. So if you're on episodic or a feature film, you're kind of like in your head, you want to get the locations picked as soon as possible so you can beat out any other production from you know, permitting that location for the date that the shooting on. So I'd say anywhere from like 3 to 5 weeks out from principal photography, you want to get on that grid, or else you're competing with the episodic TV shows that are putting their grid requests a week in before they shoot. So what the mayor's office does is you send them your schedule with all the locations and the dates that you want to be there. And then they're going to cross-reference that with all the other productions that are shooting in New York. And they'll let you know, like, hey, on August 3rd, you can't shoot in Williamsburg because there's another production there. So you might have some time to work it out with that production. The mayor's office will not share with you who that production is. So it's kind of on you to reach out to the location community, and hopefully somebody will say, yeah, that's me, we can work this out.
Right.
Or you know, you might say, sorry, I'm there, I don't want to help you guys. And another thing that I just learned on my last show, what the mayor's office is doing now, they are trying not to burn out neighborhoods. So what they'll do is they'll take the shoot day, and they'll also look at the day before and the day after you're shooting there. Because like John had said, you know, this restaurant is the go-to when you're in a pinch because you know, it clears, and that'll work for the show. But the mayor's office no longer wants to have any shows filming consecutively more than 5 days in a neighborhood.
Yeah.
So they'll ask you to either park somewhere else, like just have a different parking footprint, or they may ask you to like move your day.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll overlook stuff and they might double book a production. It's rare, but when that happens, you know, they'll eventually see it, and then you just kind of have to work it out in the 11th hour on how you're going to park everything. And that kind of hurts the residents because then you're not giving them enough notice to take parking. But yeah, I think the grid request protocol in New York is beneficial for everyone.
It's equitable too, right? It's like, it's not playing, not that I say that anybody here plays favorites, but like I said, sometimes you're on a feature and you've got the lead time, and you just can't compete with that kind of lead time on a television show. So you feel, I always feel a little bit of a mixed bag, because I've been on features where I've been that person where I'm like, I know I'm going to be down there for that 3 weeks, and everyone can go to hell because now I've got it and I got other things to worry about, you know? Ben, go ahead.
Yeah.
Film
So-
LA is only going to let you run a permit 14 days.
Right.
So there's a limit on how much you can just roll and take up. Film LA, I think, is a bit more collaborative, it sounds like, than the mayor's office. If they come up on their system and we see that there's a conflict with posting, they will give you the contact to the other show. And they will say, hey, you can't get this posting. Somebody else is sitting in it. Here they are. You talk to them and see, you're going to want to talk to them. They're not going to withhold me a permit, but they won't give me the posting that I want. I mean, if I can figure out a way to shoot there, I can't. We have other departments in the city that are very frustratingly not collaborative. Park and Rec, beaches and harbors are notorious. They won't tell you anything. And then you're on our local email list pleading with somebody who has a hold on this, but will somebody let me know if you really need those dates or reach out to me or whatever.
Yeah.
And sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. Sometimes quite frankly, you don't want to be bothered by these people that are trying to slide in around you or whatever it is. It's like, I have it, I need it. I don't know what date I need it of this span, but I don't want to be talking to 6 people a day about my dates. So
Yeah. Ben, you were gonna say too as well.
I was just gonna chip in with my scouts have now turned from real sort of true scouts into scouting ALM. So as soon as they deliver me a deck of photos, they're also submitting an application in to block that location from any other production company. So that could be anything up to 16 weeks out. So I don't show something that I will then go, oh no, I can't I can't get it. So we get a film application in. So I might have, we did a 10 episodical drama for Hulu, 5,500 pending applications for film. They're called film applications, and we'll then just drop the day before we have to pay the invoice for the parking. We'll just release it. And that's, a huge, so you see the board when you walk in, and that's just great option. I might have 20 different options for one location. So those scouts are submitting them at the same time, just to make sure you've put your stake in the ground, because otherwise you'll go and you'll get blocked. And then you have to work really closely, because then if somebody goes in Elgin Crescent, beautiful Georgian Crescent in Notting Hill, affluent residents, somebody goes in before you, they leave a generator on too long, one phone call, that's it, you're out.
So that's a big conversation about, if these cities and people like that want to invite filming as an economic benefit to the community or the municipality or whatever it is. How do you guys, are you able to have conversations on a formal level with those folks? Are you going to city councils? Are you, as a locations collectives, because you're all different, there's different agencies and unions and whatnot that represent location managers that do this. Is there a way for you to tackle the process, the bureaucracy, so to speak, of it? Because that's not, I always felt like that wasn't really our jobs. Years ago, I was always taught, hey, you're there to take pictures and then make sure that we can shoot there, and that's it. And now all of a sudden we're advocates for how to procedurally get a unit in and all this sort of stuff.
You're the bureaucracy whisperer. You're the one that has to go and decode it for everyone. Yeah, it's the same thing here. Is that location managers, you'll have to deal with the cities, and then luckily, if there's a certain point where the show gets a stonewall, they can defer to, sadly, myself and the Directors Guild will come and help out, or our provincial level. But yeah, you basically have to learn parking procedures for everywhere and who you to talk to, and it's not the job that was originally we're taught that was going to be. So much of it's the politics of it all. Yeah.
So we've adapted to that, really, I think, globally, right? I think that's a part of everybody's new reality. I wanted to just talk about, Jennifer from Vancouver Film Studios asked a question here about London offering incentives to shows about reducing their parking footprints. Do you know about that, Ben? And is that incentive sizable? Is that it all seems to me like you're gonna save $500 or $1,000 here and there and that's not really an
Yeah,
incentive on a show,
it's something that they've trialed in certain boroughs in London, and it's something that they're trying to incentivize people to do, but basically the penalties just, the what you get in return just isn't really enough when you're shooting in London. They're not halving your parking bill, or they kind of will give you a spot. There's a couple of boroughs in way out east that will give you kind of a couple of spots for free. It doesn't really kind of, and because none of the boroughs, although you would think that they would all talk, and it is helpful, but even Film Fixer, which looks after about 15 of the London boroughs, they're our go-to. You call them, right, I need 50 bays on this day, I want to shoot here. They're operating with councils that have all got different mandates, and none of them are the same. So everybody's got slightly different nuances, lead-in times, costs, and timeframes. So no, I don't think I think it will be a problem that falls to us as kind of a location manager.
So going back to the question that I asked Mike earlier, and I don't know if you were listening, Ben, but like in your dream world, what would you want to see change? Like how does the model change of how? So there's two sides of it, right? The space is that's something we can't control. Back to the columns, space is something we can't really control. We're not going to tell the developers they can't have all that space. We kind of can suggest to the studios, hey, we need more parking space built into your studio complexes. We can kind of tell the cities and municipalities, hey, you got to open up possibilities for us to be able to park our stuff if you want the possibility of us coming. But from our perspective, like the production side, I always say, if we can find ways to do run and dumps, to have smaller vehicles, to have smaller,
more efficient.
What's that? Sorry, John?
To be more efficient.
To be more efficient.
And it can be done. I mean, there was a show here a few years ago where they were in studio most of the time, and when they went on the road, the DOP was brilliant and had two electric trailers. One was HMI, one was tungsten. He knew which one he needed on each day. The rest of the stuff stayed behind. And it was never that we don't know. It's a bit of planning, and it's not all doom and gloom. Vehicles are getting smaller. We are looking at even here tying in to more buildings. The city's trying to get a list of businesses that have external tie-ins or attached to the power grid if possible. It's just that everyone has to get together and figure out that it's an efficiency for all of us too. Dump and run. Why can't it happen? Why does it have to be there? Okay, the truck's further away. Then you have a small slush vehicle that can go and bring it. Some of these are solutions we had 15 years ago when we all had stake bed trucks and slush trucks. They went away for the convenience of something bigger, and now I think it's going to have to go back to, you can have your 53-foot tractor trailer, it's 30 minutes away. You're going to have this small vehicle that you need to have what you need and send someone back and forth. It's just budgeting the time for it.
Yeah.
Not just the time though, John. I think part of the critical thing is to have your line producer and UPM on the same page with you, with your transportation department, who then, and having a strong enough line producer who can have conversations with the DP and stuff. Because for all those extra stake beds, you need extra drivers frequently. So there is more expense. I mean, the biggest thing for us, most successful, smoothest days that we have are, when there's great communication. My transportation captain and I will exhaustively go over parking and decide what we need, and we will have conversations days beforehand with department heads about the reality of what it is and what you're going to get, and ahead. It's the AD departments who are often, for us, seem to be like on another planet, because they're scheduling their stuff, and all they're caring about is like an early, they got a hair and makeup call at like 4:30 because we're doing period stuff for a 7:30, 7 o'clock call. And it's like, it's not going to happen because we can't get into these areas before X amount of time, and it's going to take us that much time. So the more cohesive communication we can have, connecting the dots with all the departments. I've had a lot of shows lately where we seem to have, I don't know if it's just so busy. I've been on a lot of shows where I've had sort of like kind of the B team, A team, AD team, or the very young ones, new ones who really don't understand the rules. And guess what? You're putting these drivers into forced calls. You can't do this with these things. And it's like, oh, we can't, because all they're thinking about is their actors.
Yeah.
And the ramifications. You have to budget. If we're going to be moving our base camp and our stuff is blocks down the road, or 30 minutes, a shuttle, or 25 in traffic, you're going to have to budget that into your day, or you're going to be into overtime also, because now we have studio pressure saying we don't want your shooting day more than 14 hours, haha. But some of them do, or they're trying to limit that to 12 or 13 hours. And when all is said and done, I mean, I've been on shows routinely. My department is hitting and transport is hitting 18-hour days.
Yeah, still
from start to finish.
Wow.
I mean, at least in our department, we can try and swap people out.
20,
But
30
we need more, I think.
Sorry, I was going to say 30 years
We
in.
need closer.
Yeah, 30 years into kind of this location management being kind of a craft. Like, I really think that in the last few years, I've seen it develop from being something where, if Mike Fantasia was here, he'd say, well, he was a ranger or whatever he was. It's like something where you're taking pictures of something, and then all of a sudden now you're actually kind of unit managing and worrying about all this logistical stuff. And it's complex because there's a cost.
It is, but it's also bringing, it's to speak to Stevie's thing, it's bringing everyone in on these conversations too. It's having the AD sit in the room, the riggers, everyone to know, how do we get this day done?
Yeah.
Not the day before, a few days before, and go, this is the limitations.
Yeah.
So how do we make it work?
That brings up a great point or question. And Mike, you had mentioned this too yesterday. It's kind of one of the big questions, big changes that I saw happen the last 15 years was the presence of rigging. And it just expanded from, it used to just be kind of feature films that did a lot of rigging and pre-rigs. And then to your point, Ben, and as well about, you've got 5-7 days at this location where everyone's got these huge trucks and cable trucks coming, and a big electrics truck is coming, and and all this heavy pre-rig. And then at the end of the day, they've rigged this whole thing up, and you're still bringing in another 65-foot lighting truck for the unit, for the main unit. And it's like, well, didn't you just get that time for rigging? Like, what happened with the rigging? What is going on here? And I know that that's a bigger conversation. It kind of the tail of this, our conversation, is that this is the start of the conversation, and that we have to take this to other departments and other craftspeople in our business, because we're only feeling the external pressure. I think we feel it most immediately right away, because the pressures, it's just taking up more of our time, right? The world is shrinking and we're still being asked to accommodate it all. But if we start to look inside and start to go, hey, transport, we need to talk about it with you guys, and these big pieces of equipment that you have, in Vancouver, I learned the other day, and I don't know how pertinent it is, but we only have really one size of generator. So we're using the same generators no matter what the draw is. It's always the same physical footprint that we're taking around with us. Sometimes you don't need that much power. Why are we toting it around? So these types of conversations, piece by piece, the minutia of it all, I think is something that we have to bring to the transport departments, to our technicians, the gaffers, the key grips, and so this conversation about parking, though it starts with us solving the problem of it on the day and finagling away, and then having to sheepishly go to our directors and producers and say, yeah, so your actors base camp is actually 65 minutes away and they're late. So we're going to be sitting here waiting for the wrong piece of sunlight to shoot the sequence. So that's when the big lights come out. It's like this compounding problem every time that you're dealing with. But ultimately, I think ultimately we have to take this conversation to other folks. And I wonder, Ben, now let me ask you this. How, location managers here, we're all union based, we're labor based. Some of the things that we can do is have conversations with our ADs kind of simply because we're all in the same pool. How does it work with all these other departmental conversations elsewhere? Like in the UK, you're not kind of governed in the same way. No, you're not.
No, we're not. No, and we're yeah, it's something that's much needed, but no, we're not. And it's very kind of, there's still a bit of dog eat dog here as well. There's not much, somebody's always.
Is there, like, here we've wonderfully been gifted with great people at Creative BC, and I'm flattering them because this is a public call and a publicly webcast thing, and I believe this, that our gang here in British Columbia, Creative BC and MPPIA, the two groups that are co-hosting this with the LMGI today, they're fantastic collaborators. They really like to work together. They were very successful in getting us going back when this pandemic sort of started to ease up for us here. And so like they've had to take the lead on this sort of thing. How does it work in places like the UK? Does the film commission, does the government?
There are sort of quangos. So you've got Film London who'll step in and try and they will talk about best practice. You've got the London councils you can go to. You've got Film Fixer, which is again a powerful collection of London boroughs. You've got film offices like Liverpool Film Office who will do everything for location managers and connect them and kind of talk about best practice and suggest ways that people who have countered problems before. Leeds, lots of regional film offices, because they want to bring people in, are a lot more forward thinking about the way they kind of communicate and the way that they connect people and share that best practice. We're not very good, and it's a challenge that I sort of talk to my team about when they say, oh, we sorted it. I'm like, no, be honest, and say it's 46 emails and 8 residents meetings and 150 phone calls, and you've been there embedded in that one street for the last 2 weeks to convince these residents to let us park, 20 tech trucks that potentially don't need to be there on their street, and I think we're very good. And I think that would, before talking to other departments, I think we should challenge ourselves to talk to our colleagues about saying, let's just talk about how difficult this job is. You don't rock up with a flat white like a camera assistant and kind of just get on with your day, or the camera team. Not talking badly about our camera and kind of other colleagues, but there are pressures that people don't see. You're not operating a camera in front of 75, 100 other people. You're doing things that people don't really understand and people don't really see you do, but it's all just happens because they rock up in the morning and it all works, but they haven't really seen the man hours behind that.
That was a great story. I think it was you that was telling it yesterday, when people show up and they just don't understand how all this stuff kind of happened, because 2 days prior was a blank slate, and they show up and everything's in position, all the gear is there, all the trucks are parked, the set's dressed, everything's done, and it's been done at the snap of a finger. It's just out of necessity. But that's what you've been doing. And so I always, like I said yesterday, we're visibly invisible all the time. If you notice us, that's when we feel like we haven't done our jobs. And
so we've started on the last job to send little WhatsApp videos to the production team, to the key HODs and production team. So we put a 70-foot techno crane in the middle of an ancient forest on a show in Belfast that we had to use another crane to get in place, and a big 18-ton flatbed to pull all of that. So we had to build a village to get all of that in, and we then had to trackway it and bog mat it and get it all in. And we've done similar things in cities to get things in place. So now we take little videos and we send them to the DOP who's on the key grip, and the producer and the line producer and the execs. And say, this is it, this is how many panels it takes to put in, and this is how many people it takes to put those panels in, and you asked for it 48 hours ago.
Yeah. Do they ever, do you think it's sinking in? Do you think the message is sinking in to those folks?
Slowly.
Yeah, good.
Yes, slowly, because I think one of the producers turned around later on in the show and went, hang on, do we really need that crane to the DOP? Because I'm seeing the bill for it, and I'm also seeing it, because they don't look at our budget, each line of our budget. Often line producers will look at the bottom line of our budget, and as long as it stays static, they're not bothered that I've spent, money on, £10,000 on trackway to get this crane in because it's protecting a piece of, precious pavement in London, or they don't think about the 40 spotters I've had to have while this 18-ton grip truck is moving down, all through the old part of London, and cobbles and fleecing cobbles in the city centre so we can get it in, but they don't really see it. So now I make sure that they do see it, because we take photos of everything and bomb them at the end of the day.
I think that's a very artful way speaking of the art of parking, it's a very artful way to illustrate the challenge. You know, I think that's, I mean, I worked for many line producer, production manager that never worked in location. So they never knew, they didn't know what's going on behind the scenes of whatever it is that they're going to shoot that day. And that's a big mystery, right? It's the big unknown to them, that why does it cost so much why are we there for 4 days? It's like, well, this is what we're doing. We're craning techno cranes into a forest. So that's what it takes. I think we're getting close to the end of time, and I appreciate all of this. I don't know, you know, I'm gonna out us a little bit. We were asked to talk about this, as to kick off a committee or a group here in BC to talk about parking. And, you know, our friends wanted us to very much be, hey, let's fish for some solutions to the problems that we're having everywhere. What are some of the solutions? And I always want to say, you know, it's hard to just pin it on one group of people and one department and find really good answers. I think we're all very crafty. So moment to moment, instance to instance, the locations department will solve these problems. And I think that the best people in the world will solve them with authority. Like we'll solve them confidently, so that it's very seamless and it's very, you know, you don't have to be mindful of what they're doing. The weaker ones, you're going to notice that there's a truck that's in the shot, or there's something that goes wrong. And we've all made that mistake. I've made the mistake countless times. Like I've made it more times than I've succeeded at it, of forgetting that one thing, that flag that didn't come down, or that truck that's parked in the wrong spot, or whatever it is. Or we just don't have enough room to figure out how to do that. We all have to do that. But I think for the most part, the concept of parking, the concept of being artful in it, is being able to tap all these different ideas and resources. And I think that that's what I hope the conversation carries on with for you guys and as locations people. And I hope that we can do that as for the Location Managers Guild. John, you know, our coffee talk, we were having great talks every week during COVID. And I learned a great deal from all these people all around the world for the talks that I could attend. And I think that that's where, you know, that's where new ideas will come from. So I hope that our folks here can get that opportunity, and hopefully we can take this conversation to the Teamsters here and to the technicians and talk about equipment, and then take it to the production people, like the producers and the production managers that don't know what the challenges are and don't understand that $100,000 per episode in parking is 5 toys taken away from the DP. So if we could take that money from parking and give it to the DP for, you know, the techno crane, or for more lights, or whatever it is that they are looking for, that's more gravy for them, right? It's just taking apples from this wasted department and giving it to something that's more fruitful and going to be seen on screen. So with that, I would just want to say thank you to everybody for coming and spending this time with us. Stevie, I really appreciate your time, and Ben, it's all off hours. Mike, I can't wait to look. You know, my kids, I told them what show you were working on. I'm not going to say it now, but they were like, "Can we get any spoilers?" The MCU stuff is just they want to know. So we'll look for that when it hits theaters. And John, thank you as always for all your help and support. I don't know if there's any other questions that we haven't. I think Ken's asked one last question here, and I don't know that we've tackled it. What can we change about our model that would help? If we want to leave this with one word or one sentence answer to answer that question, I think. So he's saying it all sounds kind of grim in the present form. Doesn't seem like a terribly sustainable model. What could we change about our model that would help? And Ben, maybe we'll start with you, and we'll just sign off with that.
I think a great change to the model would be to challenge our DOPs to be less competitive, and we've done it successfully because we're trying to share good news stories in this. And a classic my location manager on show before this one would go, "Oh, and that DOP did that with only 3 machines instead of the 9 that you were asking for, and taking all that parking." So yeah, it was quite a fun way of actually challenging people to address those models of do you need 18 cranes outside this residential house to light it at daylight?
Yeah. And Mike, any dream answers about how we could change our model, or how you see things evolving?
Well, I really like that this discussion's been brought to light. Like, I'm so happy I was brought in on this conversation. I think it's just continuing this conversation and seeing what's working for other cities and regions. And, you know, I think smaller equipment trucks when you're in neighborhoods is going to go a long way. And I think if you can park base camp in a parking lot, that's obviously the win. But if not, maybe putting the actors in hotels and just having the honey wagon, the hair and makeup and wardrobe truck on the street. It's just having less of a presence, I think, is the dream.
The dream. Stevie? Any
I agree. I mean, the smaller footprint we have, the more we preserve our locations for long-term use. The biggest thing, you know, as I said, for me is having communication and having a buy-in at a high level, that everybody is on the same page, because we all want the same thing. We want it to go smooth. We want to preserve the locations for many years of filming, and we all want to spend the money, as much money as we can, on the screen, so they have it creatively. And you know, I think a lot of people are reluctant to bring the director into this as well. I've had some directors who are very practical. Some of them function as line producers, and they'll say, "Oh, I don't need that." I have others that it never occurs to them what, you know. And when you have a director like Night Shyamalan or whatever who wants a location creatively, it starts from people like that saying, "This location means that much to me, and I am willing to, whether it takes extra time or figure that I may not have as many hours shooting to accomplish that, because we're going to have to, you know, load in or come in on a smaller footprint." A lot of the resistance stops if you have a buy-in at the high levels, at your, you know, the above the line levels, about what it means to be able to, you know, creatively bring this to the screen in the best way possible without burning the location.
That's, I think it's crucial to have that conversation. I think it's going to be forced to some degree on them, because as we're experiencing, the volumes are not changing. The streamers have boosted our business and grown it everywhere with the content needs, and this move around climate change or you know, what I like to call actual global warming means that carbon emissions are a big challenge for us. And the bigger and more frequent, the bigger the vehicles, the more vehicles that we have, the more of an impact we have. We can't really make a dent in those things, and we can't tout ourselves as an industry that's being responsible and sustainable if we're not adapting to things. And we're not all going to be able to get Tesla trucks and all that stuff very quickly. So part of that is just not consuming as much, right? I think that's something that we all feel pretty strongly is the thing. It's really the consumption. It's like, if the DOP didn't need all that equipment, then maybe he can be a bit more selective, and he or she, and get to a place where we're not using as much, and that will help our consumption. John, you have the final word, I think, unless I hear otherwise. I think you have the final word.
I think, you know, it's a conversation that needs to keep on going, because that's how we solve anything in this business. It's, we're all creative people. We'll take the best from what we get from everywhere around the world, and we make it better. So, you know, this isn't the last time we're going to have this conversation, which is a good thing.
Well, I think it's the first time we're having this conversation. At least I hope it's the first time that we're going to
publicly and without profanity. Yes.
Yeah, that's right. Well, yeah, and the other thing to throw at this, or throw into this conversation, is that that's the great benefit of a group like the LMGI and a group of people that are interested in collaborating on solutions, is that we have this great resource of being able to call Ben in the UK and say, "Hey, what are you guys doing about this? What's happening in New York? What's happening in this?" And so that, you know, I hope that people really understand that that's a great benefit of the LMGI and of this group in particular. But you know, I think that's the big lesson for me, has been being able to find other ideas in the toolkit from really great people is solved a lot of problems. That's it, guys. I appreciate your time, and ladies. Thank you to all the Creative BC, Catherine and Jennifer, and Marnie and Prem, and all those folks that do great work here in BC. Thank you to the MPPIA gang, Leslie and Amber and Peter Leach. Thank you for your energy and time and commitment with this. And John and the LMGI board, thank you for inviting us into this and allowing us to do this. And I hope to see you guys real soon. And for now, adios.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks, Hans.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Hans. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Take care.